Back when she was a child picking pockets in the harbor dives of Tarentus, Oksana would occasionally stop and linger, listening to the tales, the tall tales told by sailors about the perils of the sea in all their gruesome variety, from the kraken to the cantankerous whale, roaming ships of cannibals, and of course, ghost ships and the mighty leviathan. Back then, ghost ships sounded rather quaint in a almost romantic sort of way, befalling usually pirates for their unending greed and turning them into something almost relatable, very much unlike the things Oksana now lays eyes upon deep down in the pits of the Leviathan. Hello friends, Anderson here. Welcome back to Oksana, Thief, Gladiator, Queen, the next installment in our naval dungeon crawl is perhaps the most accurate way to reflect it. I've had, as you might imagine, a bit of a think about what our death outlaws, our undead pirates might be looking like, that we determined last time we played that we're going to be running into. But as usual, two things before we get to that. The first one is to like the video, leave a comment and subscribe. Thank you very much. The second one, however, is picking up on a point of, well, awkwardness from the last episode, because much as we have benefited from the presence of the, dare I call it, the critty boat, wherein we now actually have 5 out of 9 progress because we roll the crit against a fairly abysmal crew rating. We don't really have a name for this vessel that fits a bit better with our flavor of narrative. To be perfectly honest, I didn't give it a name because I expected it to pretty much die immediately. And now that I'm about to give it a name, I expect it to pretty much die immediately. But this is how these things work. But a name it shall have. We will refer to it no longer as the Poopy Barge, but we shall give it a name out of the scope of Northern Raider names. And as we've determined, there are some raiders by adoption. So I guess I'll just kind of do that thing here and, land on a random page, which turns out to be North Indian Hindu. I'm going to roll a die 20 and a die 6. The die 6 to determine whether we have 1 to 3 female, 4 to 6 male, and the die 20 to get a name. Female, 9, Narabala. So this is no longer the boat of excretion, it is Narabala's boat. And Narabala, we imagine, has her work cut out for her, as this thing has taken some damage, as this thing has lost some crew on their last assignment, and is now kind of hanging on and forming decidedly the weaker link in this chain of 3, but nonetheless contributing mightily in getting somewhat lucky on the die rolls, to be fair. Now, who are these death outlaws? Who are these pirates? They fit in to some extent with our theme of the Leviathan, I think, and the theme is more of a body horror type theme, I would say, looking at the somewhat Lovecraftian angle, looking at this idea that the heart is a different entity from this flesh prison around it, and thus there is some interplay between the consciousness of the heart and the will of the prison Leviathan, and thus I think this will also to some extent affect anything that gets absorbed into this flesh dungeon, and thus it should become part of the scenery a bit more than just having a regular sailboat with raggedy sails and a crew of spooky, scary skeletons, I think that is not what we're going to have. What we're going to have instead is a vision of terror befalling Oksana, Genaha, Heinrich, Hjalmar, and now Narabala, as they find themselves drawn forward by a current towards a vessel approaching them that is almost impossible to recognize as such, as the vessel implies something made, something not quite organic, which, for all its seeming this thing coming towards them, mostly is. What once might have been a terror of the seas has turned into an other. Its original wooden structure still somewhat recognizable if rotting, but the liquids that it has been exposed to and this strange brand of its own micro-reality that exists in this leviathan have warped it decidedly to where it is now looking like a mixture of exposed muscle tissue covering the sides, sinews clearly visible, barnacle-like pustules covering every surface all the way up to the mast, and in the midst of this fleshy coverage that is encompassing this former ship, even an eye blindly protruding from this mess of pulsating flesh at the front, rolling without a socket, giving the whole thing an air of horror and madness. And as it comes closer, it is quickly apparent that the crew has fared little better. They have lost most of what makes them human, existing more like warped, skinless, walking sacks of meat and bone, bearing exoskeletons of bone, warped second heads, multiple limbs, and overall just seeming to alternate between rage and constant agony. Yeah, I figured that would be a bit more appropriate to this Leviathan theme here, and also as I describe it to myself now, I think the first thing we need to do as we approach and there is this confrontation looming, we should probably make some kind of a fear check using our crew ratings and determining how each of the three vessels reacts to this looming horror coming their way. So we're going to help ourselves to our 3 dice again. We'll have the red one for Oksana, the metal one for Hjalmar, and the blue one for Narabala's vessel. And that is a complete failure with a critical failure for Narabala. I told you she's gonna die like instantly. How are we gonna play this? I think there's not much thinking going on. So as this liquid-born ship of miasma comes closer, our 3 not quite as intrepid as before vessels follow what their gut says, and their gut says run, which in the case of our line of ships that are making their way through a increasingly narrow corridor with a current to contend with that they are now up against, doesn't seem like the smartest idea, but it is nonetheless the instinct that possesses them. And as shouts go up on each of the 3 vessels, as Heinrich, Hjalmar, and Narabala shout out almost at the same time, they all maneuver at cross purposes and they start making their turns, but they collide with one another. They shave off rows of oars that are coming out now, trying to propel them forward. Wood splinters, cries go out. Sailors thrown overboard, gargling, sinking into this disgusting fluid that they are being lifted up by. And instantly the commotion goes up as these lamprey/moray-like tubular creatures fall on them and consume them. So everybody loses 1 crew strength, I think. Harsh but unfair, maybe. But on the other hand, we're also not free from consequences here. That was kind of a spectacular, oh, this went quite wrong. And now all we've accomplished is to have turned, and of course the vessel of cosmic horror is coming closer. Let's roll a die 6 to see how far apart we are here. 6, okay, I'm not gonna have that. So we have a distance of 3 successes. I think 6 would be a bit too much, but 3 feels like we're still, despite the collisions and despite everything, we've managed to make a turn, and we're now fortuitously somewhat arranged in a way that at least the fastest vessel is also the one in front, which we assume is Hjalmar's because he's got the highest crew rating. And now we'll have to see whether we can gain distance. And I think we do this for each vessel individually, because it might be a situation where we have to decide, oh, we're losing one of our ships, and then maybe we can do another morale check to see, okay, are we really writing them off, or are we actually turning around to help them and have this confrontation with the H.R. Geiger pirates, I guess. But hold on, before we start escaping, actually, we should still probably account for the critical failure of Naraballa's die roll, and maybe we do that by adding another complication from our table of horrible things that happen on the sea. So I roll a die 6. And I roll a 6, and that's a shipwreck. So we are losing Naraballa's vessel. The knock that it took was too much, and it just starts taking water, slowing down, and also doesn't have enough crew strength anymore to do anything about it. Now what do? I think we have an option to salvage some of the crew strength. Let's say we get die 3 crew strength if we manage to save some of the sailors there. But to do so, we have to give up a measure of distance every time we want to roll to succeed for this. So we give up 1 measure of distance now as our lineup of vessels starts gaining ground, but Keinrich and Hjalmar, Oksana, Genaha instantly notice that Naraballa's vessel is in trouble. The turning radius sort of peters out, and it tries to steady itself and follow the others, but they can already see that it's a little bit too low in the water. It's taken a knock somewhere in the front. A whole row of rows is missing, and also part of the crew is now lamprey food. So both Hjalmar and Keinrich give commands to lift the oars, and they drift backwards with the current again until they are somewhat level with the lilting vessel and present a chance for some of the survivors there to jump aboard, which we now roll for. Okay, so we're rolling for Hjalmar and for Keinrich's crew rating to see if we can absorb some of that crew strength. Critical success for Keinrich and success for Hjalmar. So I guess with Keinrich, we'll give him, I mean, it's not plausible to raise it too far, so we'll give him a +1, I guess, for the roll, and Hjalmar gets a regular die 3 roll. Okay, so Hjalmar goes back to 13. I think the crew rating can't really rise above that, and Keinrich actually also goes up to 13 now, as Naraballa jumps aboard, just following to the vessel that is accessible to her. In the chaos, I think naturally she might have jumped over to where her captain is, but maybe the boat is sort of full and they already start racing off, and Naraballa is the last one to come over to Keinrich's vessel and just shudders disgustedly, looking down at the sinking now ship that used to be her pride and joy. And now we can see if we can gain some distance. So we are trying to gain ground on our pursuers that are now looming closer, and their many-mouthed bodies are more visible and putting the fear back into us. Okay, we both succeed here, and therefore we negate the ground that they gained initially, and What's our win condition here? So I guess if like 3 is the distance to the boat now, there's also kind of, if we gain 3 distance from the boat, we have eluded them completely. But that sounds like it could get a little bit tedious. So, how do we make this exciting? I guess what we're mechanically doing here is we're rolling against a 13, under a 13, with advantage, which puts the odds pretty firmly on our side. So even having to gain like 3 successes now to escape doesn't sound like that much of a tall order. I think what we can do is every time we fail, we have sort of a salvo of fire from the ship behind us as they throw bone spears and shoot like strange acid from various limbs or just wretched in our direction. I think that works. So we could take some crew damage here every time we don't successfully maneuver to evade this. And if we critically fail, then yeah, we lose a lot of ground and we also take a lot of damage. But now, for now, it's like we have a 3 distance where if we get 3 failures in a row, or the total of failures gets to 3, they catch us. And if we get to 3 successes, we escape. For now, we've only managed to recreate the distance that we had at the start of our encounter here, and obviously still shaken. Everybody is rowing with renewed vigor, just looking over their shoulders, seeing these horrifying visages leering over this equally horrifying ship as the rain of bone and organic mess starts coming towards. Now, next distance check. We gain 1 more, so we have accomplished outdistancing them to some degree. And there's a shudder that runs through the crew on each of the 2 vessels now, as there is a noisy splash of strange materials hitting the, well, not really water behind them. And everybody gets this image in their heads of what might have happened if they had fallen behind just a few paces. Let's have another roll. That's a crit and a failure. I think we will take 1 progress, but we will also do some damage on Hjalmar's boat. What do we do? Do we do die 3? That's harsh. I like harsh. Let's go with die 3. 1. Okay, so Hjalmar's crew rating drops to 12 as 2 of the rowers on their respective benches are impaled by jagged bone spears being catapulted just from these fleshy tubes that some of these former pirates have dangling from them for arms or limbs or whatever might be the appropriate term here. They defy biology to some extent. As they are impaled and as they are doubling over and sliding from their rowing spots, others take their place, but also seeing the corpses writhe and seeing these strange blisters starting to form, the rest of the crew immediately recognizes there's something strange going on here and tosses the corpses overboard. We've actually almost outrun them, so let's make the potentially final check here. Well, that would have been a double success had Hjalmar not taken the damage. So now I guess we'll take some more damage. Hjalmar takes some more damage. Another one, so it goes down to 11 crew strength as the rowing speed slows down momentarily. Kine regains some distance. Another salvo rains down and a sailor trying to see what's coming there can't help himself and chooses the exact wrong moment, catching a fountain of foul liquid and just starts to steam and scream and roll around immediately and jumps overboard on their own accord. Next check. Okay, That's not the outcome I necessarily wanted, but that's the outcome we've been presented with. So the two vessels managed to make it out of that sloping, strangely arterial tunnel they were in, tearing themselves free from the current that was pulling them towards the pursuing vessel, and clearing now that part of the Leviathan, managing to slip into a webwork of what probably from an aerial view looks like capillaries, lose the pursuers and settle down just briefly, momentarily, side by side, to catch their proverbial breaths, to reassert themselves and count their losses. That's a shame. I actually wanted to fight the flesh pirates. I guess I shouldn't have made them so horrific that the fear check completely fails, but I do like the occasional runny away sequence, even though it's always a bit of hit and miss making these sort of rules up on the spot, but it's also one of the things I like about systems like the Black Sword hack, that they kind of lend themselves to patching in random types of skill checks and delving mechanics from other games or from other systems. Now, we are at 5 successes to the heart, and we need another 4 to actually make it to the heart, which means after catching our breaths, we continue onwards and we do another check now. This time we do it again with the principle of rolling a die 6 to see which one of our vessels is in the lead, Hjalmar now being the weaker link, and the die 20 to match against the rolling under of their crew ratings, which is 11 for Hjalmar and 13 for Keinrich. So 1 to 3 is Hjalmar, 4 to 6 is Keinrich's vessel. Hjalmar with the redemption arc succeeds and takes the lead fearlessly. No time to mourn the lost ship, no time to mourn the lost crew. If mourn he shall them, but at least he'll make a public display of mourning them naturally at some point. That's just the done thing. For now, though, it is buckling down and keep rowing. So row they shall through this tunnel system that doubles as a mixture of veins, arteries, intestinal tracts, digestive tubes, all kinds of nonsensically connected biological things. And we can roll one more time. And almost somewhat boringly, Hjalmar succeeds again. I am rooting for failure in these kinds of situations, because then interesting stuff happens naturally. But also, getting to the heart, interesting stuff happens, so I'm not too mad about it. We are now 7 out of 9 progress. Hjalmar is back in the saddle, is vocally giving commands and exuding confidence of, I know which way we're going, even though there's no real plausible reason why this could be true, except for perhaps this strange advisor that is lurking nearby. Maybe there is something going on there that makes Hjalmar so confident. Now, let us roll one more time. This time it's Keinrich and another success. We're approaching the heart now, which I would take to mean that the tubing that we're in actually widens and we're entering some more cavernous spaces, perhaps with some more flying denizens and parasites around us, which adds a whole new layer of unpleasantness as they navigate around strange mists hovering over the liquid, as they shield themselves against blood-sucking flying gnats that try to infest them, and as they take in the scenery around them that is getting increasingly more like a rib cage, and with huge beams that are holding up this muscle tissue around them, and we are one step removed. Are we gonna get there? No. We roll exactly a 13, we need to roll under a 13, so Keinrich produces a failure. Is anything untoward happening at this stage? Hell yes. Thank you very much. What is it? 3 overboard. Part of the crew is lost. We drop a crew rating on Heinrich's vessel. They are navigating this cavernous space, this thudding sound of the heart growing louder, and focused as they may be around not hitting strange protrusions from the water, avoiding these clouds of mist, they aren't looking up. And unlike the clouds of almost mosquito-like creatures, there is also something larger, something more bat-like, something more man-sized here that glides out of the darkness and with tentacle-like limbs wraps one of the sailors into a neat little package, carries the screaming now dinner off to whatever lair it's inhabiting here, and horrified again, our vessels continue. Another check, we are one step away, and this time it is Hjalmar who fails us again. Does something untoward happen? No, that's unfortunate. I mean, that's lucky for us, I guess. Not necessarily from a tension perspective, but at least, you know, we're getting closer. Or we have a chance to close the gap again. No, we are struggling. We are losing our way in this complex of caverns that are now emulating a kind of a rib cage, and we're simply now not finding our way to the heart as the thudding gets deafening and is harder to locate, and we are wondering whether ill misfortune will befall us, which we will now make more likely because we failed twice in a row. That's a yes. What kind of misfortune? Another one is picked off by the gliding monstrosities, dropping Hjalmar's crew rating down to 10. We are now approaching the heart fight with a much more weakened conditions than we were as we set out. I feel like this last step has been quite grueling for our party here. Hopefully we can now manage to make it to the heart. And Heinrich saves the day. So, the cavern of caverns comes into view, and it is a dome, a cathedral of gargantuan proportion. A domed roof of misshapen bone covered in muscle tissue, connecting all through a network of blood vessels, veins, arteries to a suspended heart, sort of like construct, encased in an armor almost of bone that is suspended in the center of this vessel, and the tubings are in and of themselves large enough for our two vessels to sail through, but they reach down and connect to somewhere under the liquid, and every time the heart contracts, the water level, the liquid level rather, rises and sends a stir through this sloshing chamber where the liquid buffets the ships back and forth, but also up and down, and occasionally there, as they enter and are immediately swept into the current, they get closer to this hard cage. Sometimes it drops them out of reach where they are almost dozens of meters distance now, unable to reach anything, and they are now at the heart of things. Literally a heart shaped not so much like a vessel, more like the individual connection points and dead patches of moribund muscle that make it look like a contorted face that shifts with every contraction, opening up its various valves like screaming mouths, spewing forth liquid, contorting, contracting, and thudding this thumping, bashing noise that is deafening to Oksana, Genaha, Hjalmar, Heinrich as they now prepare for a fight. And looking at the timer, I think that is unfortunately where I have to leave you now, and we'll have to pick it up next time. So thank you very much for watching. I'll catch you then, and bye for now.